Just over a month ago, I made the first part in the series of the rise and fall of the Bosnian national football team. Today, I'll be making part 2. The first part focused more on the rise of the national team, and this part will focus more on its fall. Now, if you haven't watched the first part, I would highly recommend you do, and if you haven't already, I would appreciate it if you could drop a like and subscribe on the channel. Alright, enough e-begging, let's get into the actual video. Last time, we left off at the Euro 2016 qualifying campaign, which was quite a mess. I think I already mentioned our pretty significant losses to Cyprus and Israel, which were both very embarrassing and 3 points chalked off with ease. After those results, Safet, the man who led to the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, would go on to be sacked. After that, Mehmet Bojdarevic would go on to be selected as the new coach for the national team. With him in charge, we would go on to win almost every game except for a 3-1 loss to Belgium. Now on paper, this might seem pretty good, but at the end of the day, you really can't drop 6 points to Cyprus and Israel. We ended up finishing 3rd, right behind Wales and quite a bit behind Belgium. However, we still had the playoffs to look forward to. In the playoffs, we would go on to draw Ireland, and we were heavily the favorites for this fixture. We had the home advantage in the first leg of the game, however, the fog really interrupted our flow. I mean, look at the state of this. However, it wasn't all done as we still managed to play off at least a 1-1 draw, which, while not much, was still something. In the second leg, which was an away game, we would go on to lose 2-0. And while there were some debate over if this was an actual handball and should have been a penalty, we still would have lost either way, so it didn't mean much. With this, we had failed to make a second Euro in a row, and in this one, we had no excuses for not making it. However, despite this, the FA put more trust into the coach and let him manage for just a bit longer. Bojdarevic would go on to coach us in a friendly cup called the Kirin Cup, if I'm saying that correctly, which we would go on to win. The Kirin Cup wasn't very important as our best players like Pjanic, Dzeko, Spahic or Begovic wouldn't even get a minute of play time, nor were they even called up for the entire thing. However, despite everything, it was really smart as it was a good morale boost for the team and for the fans, and it put a little bit more confidence into the national team FA. Then the 2018 World Cup qualifiers were upon us, which gave us a difficult but not impossible group. Excitement for the campaign was pretty high as we have in the past proven that we can play well against both Greece and Belgium. Things started off okay as we managed to get a good win over Estonia, but right after we got battered by Belgium. Overall, we were playing fairly well, but unfortunately we just weren't able to make our chances in Greece count as we drew both games almost back to back. This was a good Belgian side, so it was understandable to fall behind them, but it really wouldn't have been understandable to fall behind Greece. What we had to hope for now was that Greece don't steal any points off of Belgium, and hope that Estonia or Cyprus can get a good shock in and get some points off of them. But they still had a slight advantage over us as before facing us, they managed to get a 1-1 draw against Belgium. The day that Bosnia was facing Cyprus for the second time and Belgium was facing Estonia for the second time, Estonia and Greece drew, which was 2 points dropped from Greece. This was brilliant news. This shouldn't be taken for granted, yet at that point we had already lost to Cyprus.
I'm rapidly falling out of love with football. I just wonder what's the point anymore, you know.
Despite Belgium's win over Greece in the second encounter, we wouldn't be able to shock Belgium, nor would anyone be able to shock Greece. No matter with all the wins after that, we had blown it and we had placed 3rd. The Kirin Cup was great, but it wasn't enough to sway the FA's decision, as Bojdarevic was at last sacked. The legend Robert Prsinečki was hired as the coach, which brought forward some really good results in the Nations League. We were in a group with Austria and Northern Ireland, and we truly outclassed them. We would go unbeaten in the group and would also get immediate tickets to the playoff for Euro 2020 and also promotion to League A in the Nations League. We were rebuilding the entire time, so having these good results to carry us was a good glimmer of hope for all the fans. Lulic, Ibišević, Spahic, Bisimovic, basically all of them internationally retired or even fully retired, meaning that they were no longer available. Prsinečki started getting younger players involved, which really turned up the way we played. We were scoring more, we were better defensively, and our matches were so much more enjoyable. For the first time in a while, we were really good. And in the Euro 2020 qualifiers, we truly had to qualify, because our chances have never been better. We had a fairly difficult group with us. Italy, Finland, Greece were all fairly decent teams, but we still had the capability and the potential to get second place. Things would start off fairly well as we won 2-1 over Armenia and got a good but, still a bit more disappointing 2-2 draw against Greece. Finland was regarded as a pretty bad team at the time, and maybe we underestimated them. Finland would go on to get a shocking 2-0 win courtesy of a brace from Timo Pukki. However, this would be the last time we'd hear of him. To keep up the bad form, we would then go on to lose against Italy, get a win over Liechtenstein, and, come back to lose against Armenia. It was regarded that losing against Finland was really embarrassing for us. I wonder what the atmosphere was when we lost to Armenia. It wasn't a loss in which we conceded early and then they defended all game. No, we had chances. They won 4-2. They absolutely smashed us apart. They scored 4 goals. After a loss in which we suffered 4 goals, we would make Finland suffer 4 goals in our next game, as we would go on to win 4-1. This win gave us some hope that there was still something that we could salvage from this. However, a loss to Greece and a loss to Italy would remove all chance of that. Our last game would be a 3-0 win against Liechtenstein, and it was the most pointless 3-0 win in history. We placed 4th in this group. This was by far our worst qualifying campaign. However, because of the Nations League, we still managed to get playoffs, which we really did not deserve. Then the very necessary UEFA Nations League A group was ready to play. And that was a disaster. And we got a draw against Italy in the first game. I guess that's something. I mean, we would go on to lose 2-1 to Poland in the next game, but by the way, this is a bit out of order, but by the time the Nations League happened, it was September 2020. Things have already been kind of crazy with COVID and all that. The coach, Prsinečki, was sacked because of that absolutely disastrous Euros performance, and Dusan Bajic was put in place. It was no secret that no one really cared about the Nations League, players, management, fans. No one really gave a damn. It was all about the Euro playoffs and settling it at last. This was the path we were drawn into, and it was difficult, but like I said, very possible. Getting through Northern Ireland shouldn't have been an issue, and it really looked like it wasn't going to be, as Kunic scored early. Then Niall McGinn, a man who had only managed to score 4 goals for Northern Ireland competitively, would go on to score his 5th against Bosnia in the 56th minute. It would go on to extra time. No goals would be scored, and we would go to penalties. Haradinovic and Visca were the only players who missed for our team, and it would be punished. This was our 5th ever playoff. This was our 5th loss in a playoff. Morale has never been lower. There was very little to look forward to, especially because COVID put a lot of things off hold. Of course, we had the Nations League, but summed up pretty quickly, we would only go on to draw 1 against the Netherlands and lose everything else. We were relegated back into League B, and we showed how much we stink. Usually, whenever we go into a new qualifying campaign, there is always a good crowd to support it. This time, the stadiums weren't open anyways, but even if they were, they would probably still be empty. Ivar Lopeta was hired. He had nothing to show for it, he just randomly, it felt, was. People were of course not happy with the decision, but people could no longer be bothered to complain to the FA about how they were messing everything up, as they clearly weren't going to listen. When it was time for the selections against Finland and France to come in, there had already been controversy, and the ball wasn't even kicked. Our best ever goalkeeper, Asmir Begovic, wasn't selected. Visca had apparently had an injury, so he wasn't selected, and a lot of players who were key to our Euro 2020 campaign, who were seen as the next stars, weren't selected. However, all of that put aside, we played our first match against Finland in an empty Helsinki stadium. Pjanic would open the scoring in the second half in the 55th minute through a penalty. However, Finland had something brewing, and really quickly. And do you remember how I mentioned we wouldn't hear of Pukki ever again? Well, I didn't lie. I just meant it only for that competition. Pukki would go on to score 2 minutes later after Pjanic's penalty, and then would go on to score another in the 77th to complete an entire turnaround against us and finally give Finland the lead. Morale wasn't there, nobody seemed to give a damn about the result of the players, until Stevanovic gave something in and got that last bit of effort in, as we managed to snag a 2-2 draw. Our next game would be against France. We would actually hold our own for quite a bit of the game. Our defenders, Ahmed Hadžić and Todorovic, were proving crucial in that entire thing. However, we would still go on to lose through a Griezmann header. A nice long break could be seen, and in the middle of it, we had 2 friendly games. And with the selection incoming, we wondered who was going to get chosen. Players like Edin Dzeko and Miralem Pjanic were given their chances to rest. But what happened to Visca, you may be asking? You didn't ask that, you probably don't even know who he is. Well, he would finally, at last, call the manager and tell him that he was retiring from the national team. Out of all our players, he was one of the only ones that was good and was on form for Besiktas. We had a friendly against Montenegro, which we drew 0-0, and a friendly against Denmark, which we lost 2-0. The Montenegro game was the first time I ever stopped watching a Bosnian game because I really knew that there wasn't going to be a single goal. And I didn't even bother watching the Denmark game for a single second. I think what Petev was trying to do with these friendlies was to inspire some confidence, hope, and maybe some energy around the team. But he had the complete opposite effect. I cared even less about the results now. September was up, and at last the fans were allowed back inside stadiums. And we were gonna see every French fan in the fucking world at Strasbourg Stadium on the 1st of September. We should have been destroyed. The French should have killed us. Even though they just lost to Switzerland in the Euros, they should have torn us apart. Yet they didn't. I think it was like Beretut or something who gave away a terrible pass to Demirovic, who just barely put it onto Dzeko's foot, as he would strike an absolute banger and score first. Bosnia was leading against France in France. And for the first time in a while, you wondered, could we do it? Could we pull off the impossible? Take 3 points away from France in France? It's real, it's possible, and we were gonna do. Griezmann scored again. It was another header, by the way, just letting you all know. I hate that guy. However, the 90 minutes was up, and we still managed to get a draw, which was a really good result nonetheless. Then we had a game in which we had the home advantage against Kazakhstan, in which we really needed to win. The atmosphere was pretty damn good in the stadium, even though it wasn't fully packed. But the people were given some hope for that draw, and knew that they would definitely see their team win on this day. We would go on to concede first, from a corner to Kuat. If I'm saying that correctly, good. If I'm not, I don't care. Embarrassingly enough, we were losing to Kazakhstan, but we managed to score a goal from a penalty, and then one from a corner, with the substitute Luka Manolo getting his first goal for the national team. And listen, man, yeah, we were gonna get the 3 points, we were gonna get the win, but it still wasn't impressive. Oh my god, we just conceded a free kick in the 96th minute. Kazakhstan did exactly what they did to Ukraine. They had scored in the late end of the game to take away any hope of 3 points. All the hope that was given to us through the France game was now washed away through this one. This entire campaign has been exhausting, and we still had so much more to go. In October, we would play Kazakhstan for the second time. This one, we would actually win 2-0 in Kazakhstan, and once again, some hope was brought back. And we had to hope that he would do the same thing against Ukraine. Realistically, everyone just hoped that we would at least get a draw in that game. Yarmolenko, however, would score first, opening his scoring through a goal that we were so used to conceding at this point, it's almost silly. And then it was absolutely brutal with the amount of chances that we were given. We were playing really well, but we weren't able to finish, and it was really, really disappointing. However, this effort wouldn't be in vain, as it is to be remembered and put into the Bosnian history books. And with that goal, we had gotten what we came for. 1 point in Kiev, and this is how things stood for the game against Finland and game against Ukraine in November. If we managed to get 4 points, 1 win and 1 draw, doesn't matter against who, we would have gotten playoffs, which was more than enough. Now, I have good news and bad news. The good news is both of these games were in our stadium, and the bad news is Dzeka, who was on form, was injured for both of them. The hope was still alive. The stadium for the Finland game was almost fully packed out, and we were ready. However, things didn't start off right. Pjanic was chosen as captain because Dzeka was, like I said, injured, and he would go on to give away a penalty, which, bless his soul, Šeć saved. This should have been a wake-up call to the team to be a bit more careful, but it really wasn't, as not too long after that, they would score. Once again, with the bad news came good news. Raitala was sent off after a pretty egregious tackle on Sad Kolasinac. Going into the second half, they were a man down and only 1 goal up. This was more than possible. However, they were playing as if there was 12 men on the field, because there basically was. With what Eldar Cilic did here, there basically was. We conceded our second, and now it looked impossible. Changes needed to be made, and Petev made them. Luka Menelo and Goya came in, and while they would go on to score and give that glimmer of hope, it wouldn't matter, as only like 2 minutes later, Finland would score their third. Like I said earlier, we needed at least a point from this game, and the game ended 3-1, meaning we didn't get it. I'm not going to talk to you and bother you too much about the Ukraine game. We would go on to lose it 2-0, putting Ukraine in a playoff spot, but it wouldn't matter. That was basically it. The team had never been in a worse state. We had now placed 4th, and it was absolutely awful. A lot of young players were on the come up, and they were going to waste their talent sitting either on the bench here or rotting away on the pitch. To keep up the absolutely immense losing streak, we would lose to US in a friendly and lose to Georgia in a friendly. The US friendly was in December, and we had 2 friendlies in March, one of them being that Georgia lost 1-0, and the worst win in history was the Luxembourg 1-0 win. But I don't want to end this on a sad note, because what we're doing in the Nations League at the moment has been really, really impressive. Now, I don't want to ramble around it for too long, because I want to make a video about it sometime soon, but we are doing really well as things stand. We managed to get a 1-1 draw against Finland, a 1-0 win against Romania, a 1-1 draw against Montenegro, and a 3-2 win against Finland. It may not sound like the best, but we are playing really good right now, and we were a bit unlucky in both of those 2 draws. However, we are happy because we are currently topping the group. We've got some good young players like Aminozic, Hadjikadinic, Demirovic, Gazbegovic, Dedic, Percic, I mean he's not really young, and Hadjihmetovic, and so many other players who are just really good now. Now, of course, this isn't quite the full story, but I think I'm gonna end it here. This video is a bit more detailed, mainly because this was a lot easier to research, and also because, well, I had a lot less to cover. However, I do appreciate you all watching this, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Maybe it'll be like a movie or a show review, or maybe it'll just be an overall review of the Nations League as things stand. That'll be about it. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and subscribe if possible. And until next time, goodbye.